So, hello, ladies. My name is Raisa Palmer, and I am the host of the Etobicoke Book Club chapter. And Etobicoke, for those of you that don't know, is in the suburb of Toronto. So, we are just on the west end of Toronto. And I have had the pleasure of being the host for just over 2 years. And I am super delighted that Erin, our founder of the Girly Book Club, has asked me to host the book club chat for this month of October. And our book is The Broken Girls. And we have our author here with us today, Simone St. James. And I was so excited and super delighted because I absolutely love this book. I love mysteries and thrillers and a little bit of ghost story thrown in and something that is super well written, which this book absolutely is. So I hope you have had as good an experience as I have in reading the book, and I see that there are a lot of our members that have joined on the call today. So welcome all of my fellow book club members. And also welcome to you, Simone St. James.
Hi, it's nice to be here. It's fantastic. I'm very, very excited.
Thank you. We are really, let me just switch to gallery view. Simone, and this is some of our members that are on video as well, and we'll change it to speaker view.
Hi,
So
Ron.
perfect. And Simone, we are really delighted to have you with us today and to be able to ask you some questions about the book and to learn some insights into how you've created the book and some of your inspirations. So if you don't mind, we'll get started with some of the questions.
Sure.
Perfect. So the first question is, how did the idea of the book start? Did you start with the story of Mary Hand first? Did you start with the story of Sonia first or Deb first? Where did you come up with this fabulous idea for a book from?
First of all, I just want to mention that my cat is also helping me answer these questions. I came and sat down, and she decided she's going to sit there and go to sleep. So she's hanging out with us tonight. Her name is
And
Taylor.
her
And
name's Taylor. Well,
Ta-
welcome, Taylor. We are
yeah,
happy to have her here today.
Taylor is photobombing tonight. Where did I get the idea for the book? I think the first thing that came to mind when I came up with this book was the scene in the where they open up the well and they find the body in the well. I had kind of that sort of image came into my mind. I knew it was. I wanted to write about a haunted girls' boarding school. That was something I've always wanted to write, and so I was kind of coming up with the idea, and this image came into my mind, and it was them going into this well, opening up the well, finding the body of the girl in the well, and I wanted to know, first of all, who was the body, and how did she get there, and then I also wanted to know who found her and what was the story of that character, the character who finds her in the well. And so that's where I started. I was like, well, I want to know the answers to this. So I started just in my mind sort of spinning out various ideas of who these two people were and how their paths might have crossed. So that was actually the first scene of the book that I came up with when I was thinking about it.
And how did you think of the Mary Hand character, and how did that tie into the boarding school? Did that come about later in the story? Did that come about early? Because that whole central character kind of weaves through from the start to the finish.
Yeah, Mary Hand was a very early part of the story because like I say, I wanted to write about a haunted girls' boarding school, and so I wanted to. It's a great thing because when you're writing a ghost story, the first question every reader has is, why the heck don't these people just leave? And that's the biggest story question you always have, is like, oh, this place is haunted, let's get out of here. So a girls' boarding school where all these girls are kind of powerless, they're stuck there, and it's haunted. So to me, that was a really great setup. And so I wanted Mary Hand to be the ghost who's been there ever since it was built, and every generation, every successive generation of girls has had to deal with her, and they've all sort of warned each other about her and had there's legends about her. And so yeah, Mary Hand was definitely a very early part of the story. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fabulous how you wove her into the actual comments in the girls' textbooks. So, when you're thinking about all those details and about that whole part of the mystery, what is your writing process? Do you think sequentially about the whole story and how it's going to happen from event A to B to C? Or do you then figure out how to put them together? Do you storyboard? Do you put post its on a wall? What's your writing process around that?
Well, like I said, the very first germ of the story, long before I wrote anything down, was I just start getting images in my head, and I'm interested in the answers to these questions. Who are these people? What happened? So that's where I start. Of course, that's long before the writing process actually starts, because I can't start writing until I know at least who these people are and why I care about them. So I kind of start with a rough idea in my head of kind of what this overall solution to the mystery is. But I don't know exactly how I'm going to get there. And if that mystery solution for some reason doesn't work, I will change it if I have to. But when I start, in order to start writing, I have the first thing I need is my setting and my characters, because I just want I have to write about people that I'm just really, really interested to follow around. So I come up with my characters, and I kind of have an overall idea of what the answer to this mystery is, who the murderer is or why. But as I'm writing, that kind of builds out, and as I say, I'll get rid of anything that doesn't work, or as I get halfway through, I'm like, you know what, that's just lame, and I came up with a better idea, and I'll swap it out. But I do have a bit of an idea, but it's definitely not a scene by scene detailed outline of everything that's going to happen. I don't know any of that stuff. I just have a rough idea, and then as I go, I'll kind of outline the next 5 to 6 chapters. I kind of know where it's headed for the next maybe 50 pages. But I don't have an outline of the whole thing from beginning to end for sure.
Yeah, it's always fascinating for us as readers, and as well in the Girly Book Club, there's often questions that come up where people will ask, what was the author thinking and how did they actually construe the events of the story? So it's really lovely of you, Simone, to be able to share that, to hear that firsthand.
Yeah, we authors tend to forget that not everyone has an author brain. So it seems very, very straightforward to us, but then people ask us and they're like, I don't understand how you think that up. And it's like, well, doesn't everybody think this stuff up?
Yes, no, most of us are not as creative and think in as many colors as our authors do, which is why we enjoy reading the books so much. So the next question is really around the Idlewild Hall. So for me in particular, the way that you write, it was incredibly vivid, and I could see this movie in my head, and I would actually be surprised if you didn't get optioned for a movie, because the pictures that you painted were so vivid and so amazing, and I could feel the cold and the fog rolling through the fields where the different bodies were found in the well. So did you, with Idlewild Hall and the town of Barrens, was it based on a real place? Did you see something or hear something of a historical nature that inspired you? How did you get to those kind of places to be the setting for this incredible story?
It's not based on a real place at all.
Oh, that's too bad. I'd like to go visit.
Don't go. I'm warning you away. Yeah, no, it's not based on a real place. I've been to New England before. I think I've read The Secret History by Donna Tartt about, well, at least 4 times. It's one of my favorite books. But so it kind of is a bit of a tribute to that. But I actually did, as I wrote it, made a handwritten map of everything, where all the buildings are, just a scribbled one on a ripped out piece of paper from a spiral notebook. And I just sort of mapped everything in my head, where the road is, where the drive-in is, all these things. I kind of mapped them out in my head, so I could just kind of see them in my head. And I just kind of, as I wrote it, I just described it the way I could kind of picture it. So that's mostly how I did it. I kind of built it out as I wrote. I have this building and that building. I thought, well, there'd be a cafeteria and there'd be this and that. And where would that be? And then the garden was something that kind of came up as I was writing, was going through, and I thought the garden would be really creepy if it was just always in the shade and it never quite dried out, and it was always just like kind of gross, and everyone was stuck having to dig in it. Like, what a great little thing. So I put that in the shadow of the 2 other buildings. And so, yeah, for me, it was just very vivid in my head. So I just wrote down all the things that I'd kind of built out in my imagination.
Yeah, I think for myself as a reader, and I'm sure for some of our other girly book club members, that the setting itself and how you describe the road where some of the girls in the boarding school had to walk down, and then where one of the main characters was really kind of stuck with her car and had to walk. Like all of that was so vivid. It was fabulous. So
Yeah, I
we
had a
really
map. I
enjoyed
wrote a
that.
map for myself that I made where everything was.
Yes.
I kind of kept all the details straight that way.
No, and that was great because for us as a reader, it made it clear. And
Mhm.
for everyone that's on the call, you are going to have a chance to ask any questions that you have. So we'll have some time towards the end for that. So don't worry. If you've got some burning and pressing questions for Simone, we'll introduce some time for that as well. So the next one really, so one of the things I absolutely loved about the book is that each of the female characters were very different personalities, but each of them had their own core strengths. So even if they showed weakness to other people, each of the girls and the women in the book really had their own strengths. And it was really lovely to see, instead of the sort of stereotypical book in a murder mystery where maybe the female characters are just completely falling apart and need a male character to actually come in and save them. So, can you speak a little bit more about them? Because even Mary had a strength to her that you really see towards the end of the book.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the main themes in the book is, and just for me as a reader, and I think I'm gonna, a lot of you, the girly book club readers, if they think about it, feel kind of the same way. But, you know, I grew up and we all grew up reading books that were, mostly about boys and with female side characters. And if you're my age, you grew up, the only books that you even had as a young adult that were about girls was like Babysitters Club books, which we all read, but like that was it. There was no, it was before the Hunger Games or any of these other great YA books that have come out. And when we grew up, it was like, well, I got nothing to read, that you really have nothing to read that reflects you. So as a writer, that's something that I just have that freedom, even if no one ever wants to read it, I'm just like, well, I'm just going to write a book that's all about girls and it's all about us. And you know what, all the good and the bad and the ugly, like there are women in this book who are evil. There are women in this book who, who have major flaws. Mary Hand aren't even like some sort of psycho. And, like there's people who, and they get along or they don't get along, or they annoy each other, or the girls in the boarding school annoy each other. Fiona's got a ton of flaws. She's had this horrible thing happen in her past, and she's frozen and she's stuck and she can't get past it. And she's not really, in the beginning of the book, she's not really running her life very well. And she's not really even willing to admit it. So, I mean, I didn't want to write about just, the female hero who just does everything great. I wanted to write about how life really is for us, good and bad, and how women often dig deep and get past this stuff by whatever means necessary, even like, as the girls in the end, and Katie's like, this is what we had to do and we did it, and none of us are sorry, and this is just what we had to do to survive. So I just, that's a big theme of the book, is how it's also part of the title, which is, I wrote the title. Usually sometimes a publisher comes up with the title, but that's my title. And it's just sort of all about how women sometimes are broken, but some of them are not as broken as they seem, and they manage to dig deep and get through life even with all that baggage.
And I'm so glad that you touched on the title, because a lot of times, like you said, the publishers do choose the title. So
Yeah.
the fact that you've chosen the title for the book, and really too, like when Fiona is one of my favorite characters in the book, as the main character and sort of the narrator for the story, and the one that leads us through from start to finish. Do you think for her is redemption in her future, and is her future include Jamie as she's going forward? How, because I think it's going in that direction, but where do you kind of see her future ending up as?
Yeah, I love Fiona a lot too, and there were readers who loved her and readers who were like, I wasn't so crazy about her. And that doesn't surprise me, because Fiona is, she's kind of difficult, and she's difficult for very good reasons, because she's had a lot of terrible crap happen to her. So I wanted to write a heroine who starts out not perfect. And this harrowing thing that she goes through over the course of the book makes her rethink her own choices that she's been making, and try and figure out how she can, get past them to something new. So yeah, I do think that things get a lot better in her future. I do think her future definitely includes Jamie. And I just, yeah, that, but I wanted to make that to be kind of, I didn't want it to make it that Jamie saves her or that it's Jamie's love that just makes everything better. She has to make herself better. She has to pull herself through that. She has to mend her relationship with her father. She has to, in a way, mend that relationship with Deb, her dead sister, because she kind of does at the end. So, she has to do all that stuff herself. So that's why Jamie sort of plays a secondary role. He's kind of like, I kind of had fun because he's kind of like, if you swap the genders, you get, there's the regular detective story where he's like the great cool detective or the journalist, and then there's just like the lady who's the love interest. Well, I just kind of flip flop that a little bit. So Jamie's just kind of the side love interest, which was fun. But I think it does end positively for both of them for sure. I think they're meant to be together.
And as a woman, and I'm in my mid 40s, and having gone through lots of relationships and watching my girlfriends go through lots of relationships, I thought it was absolutely fabulous to have a character who, while she's self-sufficient and can live and support on her own, the man is a nice thing to have, and he's very strong and he's a positive foil to her. But it was nice to read in a book that he didn't run in to save the day, that she was the one that actually figured out what happened and figured out her solution. And even though, in the crazy world of your book, his dad was shooting at her and trying to kill her and kidnap her and strangle her, the fact that, or not shoot at her, but strangle her, the
Right.
fact that character that in Fiona was really strong, I really appreciated as a woman, and especially as someone who's gone through multiple relationships and through all sorts of things that have happened, and a lot of my girlfriends have, and I'm assuming a lot of our readers in the Girly Book Club have felt that as well. So
Right.
I really thought that was a courageous choice as a writer for you to make, that Fiona could have stood on her own, and that, yes, Jamie was there to support her, but kudos to you for writing in that way.
Yeah, and at the same time, Jamie is genuinely good thing in her life. Like, and there's no like, oh, he's secretly belittling her, or he's gonna hit, or like nothing like that, or he's cheating on her, anything. Like even through the whole thing. I mean, he's genuinely one of the things in the book that's really, really good, and trying to be really good, and trying to be better. And he just does love her, and he's kind of devoted to her. And so one part of her journey is realizing that this is a great guy. Like I try and figure. I've had this great guy all along, and I've been, messed up in my own head. And if I could get out of my own head, maybe I could figure this out. So yeah, that was a fun dynamic to write for sure.
And the fact that you made him younger than her, so you sort of threw that gender stereotype on its head. I
Right.
love that, because it shouldn't be anything about age. It should be about how one person makes the other feel.
Right. Yeah. They just had a lot of chemistry. I put them on the page together, and they had a lot of chemistry together. So I just kind of went with it.
Yeah, I love that. Who would you pick to play if the movie was cast to play Fiona and Jamie? Who do you think that would be? Have you thought about it?
Well, Fiona, when I was writing it, is based on Jessica Chastain. So that's, hey, I'll put that
Go
over you.
for it. She's awesome.
I love her. I think she's absolutely fabulous. She's talented. She's over 30, so she's just this amazing talent. I'm trying to think. I think Jamie was, when in my head, was Charlie Hunnam. I think when I was writing, because
And
he's a
who's
blonde.
that? What was he in?
He was in the Sons of Anarchy. And
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, because it was really funny. I sort of pictured him as kind of a young Brad Pitt,
okay, yeah,
kind
yeah,
of,
yeah,
because of the blonde hair, blue eyes, really good looking,
yeah,
manly.
like the
Like,
Thelma and Louise Brad Pitt. Yeah,
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So,
go for it. Put that in your head while you're reading.
absolutely. So okay, so then Mary Hand. So actually, for me, Mary was actually one of my favorite characters by the time I got to the end. In the
Yeah.
beginning, I was obviously scared of her, and I did have, a few nightmares about her in the beginning. But who would you choose for Mary Hand? And the end redemption scene with the baby. Like, in my thought, I was like, yay, Mary had a happy ending. She got the baby and she's moving on, hopefully, to a happy life instead of scaring everybody. So what were your thoughts on Mary?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I wanted I wanted there to be a resolution where it's like she isn't, like there's a reason she's haunting this place, and it's because she's stuck in the garden and she wants a proper burial. So I just wanted a nice resolution, but it's still a pretty creepy resolution because, well, she's probably gone. I figure she's probably gone, but maybe not. Who knows, right? But yeah, I just wanted it because I had the characters kind of come around, so I kind of wanted to have that resolution as well. You don't always have that in a ghost story. Sometimes the ghost story ends up just with your characters just getting out of that setting and never going back, and the ghost is still kind of there, which is also a good ending. But for this particular one, I kind of chose to have the whole thing have a resolution.
So with Mary Hand, who do you think would play her in the movie? Like, who is your picture, your image of Mary?
I didn't have a picture for her. Mostly because in a lot of the movies or a lot of the books, she has a veil, or she's her back. You see her from behind. There's the part in the climactic scene where Fiona just sees her feet under the skirt, or she's seen from a distance. So I don't think I had an actress in mind, actually. So yeah, that casting is open.
No, that would be great. And it's funny, I almost like the whole book, the way you were describing it and the way we were reading it is obviously she was always behind the veil and it was her skirt or her feet or the silhouette of her, or the movement. But at the end, how you're writing it, I sort of pictured where we actually could see her face in the last moment with the baby, because all of a sudden she was resurrected and able to go to her resting place because she,
Yeah.
her baby and her were found. And
Yeah, that works. Yeah, for sure.
so did you do any research into, because it was funny, the book always focused all the way through about the smell coming from the grave site that was there, and then at the end, at one point it was like, oh my god, did they lift it and nothing is there, or did they lift it and was there just the remains or the skeleton? Can you talk a little bit more about writing that scene and figuring out, was it true to life, was it part of your imagination, what did that look like?
You mean the very last scene?
Yes, where they're uncovering everything and everyone's there and they're watching.
I enjoyed writing that scene because I kind of played with it a little bit, because you're really more looking at the characters who are watching it. And so I didn't want to end the book with a big, disgusting, detailed description of some corpse they're digging up. That just seemed like the wrong note to end it on. I really wanted to keep focused on those characters, and how for them this is a big resolution, especially for the girls. And they've given Sonia her proper burial, and now they get to give Mary her proper burial, because in a way, as much as they were terrified of Mary Hand and hated her, they also lived with her for years, and so they're actually a little bit invested in making sure that Mary gets the burial she wants, because she's kind of a companion of theirs, for better or for worse, or she was. So I just wanted to keep focus on the characters who are standing there, and sort of how they're reacting to everything. And yeah, so I didn't want to end the book on a big gruesome description, so I kind of kept that off the page.
And where, for Mary and for kind of the end of her story, or I guess the beginning of the story for Idlewild is, do you think that Idlewild should be resurrected? Because I know all the characters in the book are like, absolutely not. This should be closed. It's evil. It's horrible. Like, did the place contribute to the demise of Mary and what happened? Did Mary cause the place to be, because of what happened to her and her baby? Did that cause the effect? Do you think Idlewild should be resurrected? What are your thoughts as the creator of it? What should happen?
I think Mary poisoned Idlewild from the beginning, and she was kind of the presence that poisoned it. It made the whole thing creepy and weird, and kind of rotten. I don't know. I don't think Idlewild should be resurrected, because aside from the fact that it was haunted, and it's just a place where so many girls had so many bad memories, it's not a very happy place. So I think it should probably I think Katie leaves it to rot, but I think it should probably just be torn down and left alone, maybe made into a park or something.
Something with redeeming qualities at that point,
Yeah,
right?
something with no buildings.
Anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Somewhere where just people can just go and their kids can play or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea as well. So, one of the things that also struck me in the book was the fact that the police department was, I thought, pretty real world. It was sort of a depiction of an old boys club. And you talk about it where even though the chief had retired, it was about, how sort of they helped each other, they helped out their friends. It was, quid pro quo that's happening. Did that storyline evolve naturally because of who you chose the killer to be? Or well, one of the killers to be, besides Tim Christopher, but or how did you decide to create that kind of an atmosphere and include that within the book?
Well, I just wanted it to be a setup where Fiona is kind of not going to get any help from the law, and the girls certainly in the 1950s were not going to get any help from the law. So it's kind of like, um, you're in the 50s. I mean, if their friend disappeared, oh, why don't you just call the police? Just call the police, like, and or like, why don't you just call the cops? And so I just wanted to make it a system where that was never going to work. And so these women in both timelines have to make it work themselves sort of outside of that system, and that system is really closed off to them, and it's actually kind of hostile to them. So that's how Fiona is still, has to use her own ideas and her own wiles to get this figured out. And she has Jamie, who is kind of, and that's kind of an interesting thing because he is a cop, but so there's that tension there because he's part of that system, but at the same time, that system is never really going to help her with any of this. So that was part of that setup, was just that these girls are really kind of on their own dealing with it.
Yeah, and I thought it was a really good analogy, even or a metaphor, even for today, because we're dealing with the Me Too movement right now, and we're dealing with issues where there are good old boys clubs, whether it's within the police field or in business or in different places. So I thought it was pretty relevant how you actually explained it from the 50s and then to now. Jamie's role was interesting because we do see obviously men that are within those different industries that are more self-aware and that do not kind of buy into that old boys club.
Right.
And I thought it was interesting. You had the character, and I forget his name, the one from the movie theater, the drive-in theater, who sort of straddled kind of both worlds. Like he wanted to help, but he was part of the old world and scared. So I thought it was well done how you had written that part and that component to it.
Well, and especially, the young teenage girls in the 1950s, I mean, no one's going to listen to them, right? And that's kind of brought up several times in the book. That was part of bringing that era to life, which is just, there's just no one who's ever going to listen to these girls. It's never going to happen, not even their own parents in this particular situation. And the teachers are kind of like, vaguely well-meaning but mostly overwhelmed, and like there's just nobody who thinks they have anything valid to say, and so that's just their world, and they're just like, that's life, that's the way it is. And so and then that kind of carries forward through the generations more into Fiona's era, though it's a little bit different. But I wanted to make that 1950s, that's part of that atmosphere, that kind of suffocating atmosphere back then.
So that brings us to the next question about the girls in the 1950s portion of the book. So with Cece and with Katie and with the rest of the girls, you created for them, like they created their own family amongst themselves. And we see towards the end of the book how strong that family connection is and how much they actually stayed together, even more so based on than their biological families, based on what happened. So is that an inspiration from your personal life? Was that a creation from your mind? How did that storyline between those girls come about?
That was just, once I put those girls in that setting, um, that was just how I saw them behaving. And they, when one of their own disappears and no one is going to help them, I just kind of saw how how that could work. And I am a woman, and I know a lot of women, and I can see there are a lot of women I know would who would make that kind of a relationship and would keep that kind of relationship for that many years. And it's not a relationship where they see each other every day, but even if you don't see that woman for 10 years, and you meet up with her and you're like, yep, it's like no time has passed. And we all have that at least one or two of those relationships in our life. So I could just kind of see that happening. And for me, a lot of ways it's a very dark book, so I'm trying to bring in things that are genuinely good into the book, and that's one of the things that's just genuinely good, that these girls are, because I know when the reader's reading it, there's a lot of dread, like, oh, like something like this is just going to be nonstop horrible things happening to these girls, and you're like, but I don't want it to be a relentless horrible thing. Like there's good things that are happening, and they're making their own good things, and they love each other, very deeply in a lot of ways. So I didn't want it to be just bleak. I wanted there to be a lot of really good positive things also buried in there that come out of these things.
And I think for us from the Girly Book Club for the readers, one of the things that comes out in all of our Girly Book Club meetings is we end up making a really strong connection with other women.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of us that have joined the Girly Book Club, it is to make friendships, because perhaps we've moved to a new city and, in your 30s or 40s or 20s, how do you make new friends?
Yeah.
So the fact that we feel those connections in the book club, I really enjoyed as a reader, the fact that the girls in your book club had made those connections and kept them into their adulthood and into their lives. And I mean, really at this point, it was 50 or 60 years later where
Mm-hmm.
they're still connected and they still connect each other. So I'm happy you put in a happy endings for some of them, because it wasn't, like you said, all bleak, that there were some positive points. So it was a good balance. I just found that was written really, really well.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, that's just, I could just kind of see that. So I don't know, it made a lot of sense to me. And that's also just something you just don't read very often as women, we just don't read really, really good female friendships that make that seem really real to us. And I even have Fiona at one point, and she's trying to figure out who could have done this, and she makes a list, and it's like, oh, well, maybe the three of them ganged up on Sonia and killed her and threw her in the well. And even Fiona's like, God, that's like, I don't think that's what, and so but that's kind of the cliche when you're writing about teenage girl friendships, is that they're catty and they hate each other and they're competitive and they're, that's kind of the cliche setup. So I even kind of put that in there where Fiona's like, that sounds like a cliche. I don't know if that's, I guess I should be considering it, but I don't think that's what happened. So, that was kind of fun for me to play with that, because I was going against the cliche for sure.
Yeah, and I think for us as readers that's very refreshing to see, because a lot of it is where it's just the female protagonist ends up with, the shining knight or white knight in shining armor at the end, and the girlfriends are trying to sabotage them and kill them or get rid of them or step in between them and their man. So it was a great book to see, and I think for a lot of our readers in the book club, because we are about strong female relationships, and I think there's a healing in that and a power in that. So it was great to see it woven into the story. And great to see. And I wanted to know more about what happened with the characters after the boarding school and up until the point where they're now in the future. I wanted to know more. Yeah, exactly. You could totally write another book about that one for sure. So this brings us to the next question, is about who is your favorite character in the book and why? Or who did you enjoy writing the most for? And it doesn't have to be the same one.
Well, the character that was just a flat out delight to write every single page was Katie. I mean, she was just a delight, because she's really not, I'm not like her at all. And she's just fearless, and she's bold, and she's beautiful, and she, everything is stacked against her. And she's just she's young enough where she's just like, I don't think I care, and I think I can, and she just kind of walks into everything and just takes it on and face on. And she's funny. She's a very funny character, at least to me anyway. I thought she was funny. So, and, she was a delight. I actually loved writing Cece a lot, because I thought Cece was kind of a funny character as well. Like she's just not, her inner, what's going on in her inner mind in those chapters is nothing like what anyone perceives. She's so much smarter and more perceptive than anyone perceives, but she doesn't think that she is. She thinks she's fat and stupid. So it's just sort of a great sort of tension to put in. She was a lot of fun to write. So, and Fiona is one of the characters I'm really proud of, as I say, because she's a complex woman who's not all great. She doesn't have all the answers. She hasn't figured everything out. She's done some things, and she's made some decisions about her life that maybe haven't been the right ones, and she's got to dig herself out of them. And she has to do that herself, and they're her own decisions. So, I was pretty proud of writing female character that was just, pretty true to life, I think.
Okay, Simone, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Who or which character are you the most like?
The one that I'm the most like? Gosh, I think I'm a little bit like most of them. Maybe Roberta. I would have to pick, maybe if there's one, Roberta is the most like me, really reserved. Yeah, probably Roberta is the one I most like. But you put it when you're writing, you put a little of yourself into a lot of the characters, or you put a little of who you wish you were into a lot of the characters, and sometimes you put in, the things that, you kind of rewrite the parts of your history that you kind of wish you could rewrite those things. Well, then you get to do that in the book. You kind of go, okay, well, she didn't make the decision I made. She made a better decision. So I get to rewrite that part. So you put a lot of yourself into all the characters, for sure. Yeah.
I love that. And one of the things I too liked about the characters is there was nobody on the female side that was despicable. There were, even in Mary Hand, like there were, once you got to the end, because in the beginning I was obviously really scared of her.
Well, except for the Nazi. So.
Sorry?
Except for the Nazi.
Oh my God, yes, you're right, of course. Yeah, so totally not redeeming. Forgot about her. Forgot about her totally. But the rest of the characters, the main characters, like there was something that we could identify with in each of them. And I really enjoyed that part of it. And it's amazing how even going between today's portion, like the part of the book that happened today and then the part of the book that happened in the 1950s, we got a really full fleshed out feeling of who these women were and who these characters were in those times. So I think the character development that you had done was phenomenal, because you could have spent, pages and pages on that, but you managed to condense it and make them really real to us.
That's awesome.
Perfect. Yeah, I love the book. So I'm hoping our readers felt the same way. So I have a question from one of our readers that had gotten emailed. So this is from Joanne Barber. And Joanne said, "Hi there. I loved reading your novel. It would definitely be on my recommendation list for my friends and family. My copy of your book is literally traipsing around the country." Fabulous.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah. My sister is 2,000 miles away who has it now, and she's likely to pass it on to my aunts when they go to the South after the holidays. So my question is how did you write the novel? You have many delightful twists. Were they planned, or did they come up as the plot evolved in the writing process? Do you use diagrams? Do you storyboard, charts, key cards to lay out the story? And P.S., she is waiting for your next book, as are the rest of us. So Simone, can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I mean, I went over that a little bit, but I mean, I don't do a full beginning to end plan, for sure. I have an idea of where it's going. I have an idea of what the answers are. And then as I work my way through, I kind of can see a few chapters ahead, and I go, oh, you know what, I think that is where this is going. And then I kind of get there and I go, yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, I think this is where it's going next. And so, but in the back of my mind, of course, I'm always looking at the overall thing. And, I was kind of noodling on it always in the back of my mind of where it's overall going. And this book was a bit different because I usually write in Microsoft Word, and I just pull up a Word document and I start at chapter 1 and I go, and eventually a year later, it's all the way down at the bottom. But this book, I actually did it a bit differently, and I used a program where you can lay out your chapters and kind of make notes of what's in each chapter. So I kind of mapped out, because there's a certain pattern part of the book where it's like present, past, present, past, present, past. It's exactly mathematically, and then it kind of goes off schedule there. But so I was kind of mapping out, and I was mapping out which point of view the chapters were from, because the past chapters are, there's a Katie chapter, there's a Roberta chapter, there's a Cece chapter. So I had to map that out a bit. Which is more mapping than I've ever done in a book before that. And to do the dual timeline, you have to do a bit of mapping out of, you just can't kind of improvise it. So I had to do a little bit of mapping, but it was not a detailed outline for sure. It was sort of just a rough idea.
So we actually have Joanne is here with us today. She's been drinking her wine, so I'm going to unmute her and we're going to say hi to Joanne.
Oh, cheers.
Hi. I wasn't expecting that at all.
Well, you look so happy watching. So Joanne, where are you joining us from?
Saskatoon.
Oh, awesome.
Lovely. That's
Yeah.
fabulous. Okay, did you have snow? Did it melt?
Very little, and it's gone.
Okay,
So yeah, no, it's we've had a beautiful fall.
good.
It's
I was going to say,
lovely here.
if you'd had more snow, I just would have read more books by Simone.
Yeah, no, I pretty much inhale books. So when the opening came up to host in Saskatoon, I chose to keep it going.
Yeah.
So we're meeting next week, and it'll be interesting to see the conversation, because this was my kind of book, genre. So be interested to see what other ladies thought of it as well. But thank you for answering my question. Like,
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, this is.
yeah, I kind of thought you might have had to map it out or use cue cards or
Kind
something
of, yeah. Yeah.
to keep everything straight, because there were some wonderful twists.
And there was a
Thank you.
lot of revising, I gotta say. Like when I finished it, I went through it again, and then my editor went through it again and picked out the inconsistencies. This doesn't, why? And then so there was definitely, it was just definitely not like I wrote it and it was done. There was a lot of going back and forth over that book for sure.
Wow, yeah. So what's your go-to drink when you're writing?
I normally love wine, but I can't drink while I'm writing because
Nope.
you just get so fuzzy. Wine is for after the word count goal has been met for the day and I'm off, then I drink my Sauvignon Blanc, but not while I'm writing for sure. Otherwise, nothing would get written.
And Joanne, you had a question that you posted in the chat, which was one of my questions. So if you would like to ask that of Simone, that would be lovely.
Sure. Your next book, I'm curious where the setting will be.
Oh, so my next book, it actually is done and it comes out in February of 2020. The title is The Sundown Motel, and it takes place in a rundown motel in upstate New York, and it's another double timeline. It's there's a set timeline in 1982 and a present day one, and basically it's about a young woman who's working as an overnight clerk at this motel in 1982, and she's all alone in this motel, and one night in 1982 she vanishes as she's working and is never seen again. And then in the present day, that young woman's niece is now 20 years old, and she's always been fascinated by the family mystery. So she takes a leave from college and she goes to this small town in upstate New York to go find out what happened to her aunt. And she goes to the same motel and they have a posting for an overnight clerk job. So she takes the job and she's working the same job in the same motel as her aunt 35 years ago. And it's pretty lively at night in that motel. Pretty lively. Yeah. So that comes out in February.
Joanne, how does that sound to you?
I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, I unmuted you. So how do you think that sounds?
Oh, what came to mind was the Eagles Hotel California.
Yeah.
When we were talking about that, it's like, oh, I could hear the music in the background. Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. So will you ever write a Canadian location?
I don't know. I just kind of go where my creativity takes me. So yeah, if it came to me as a really, really great setting, for sure I would. Yeah.
Joanne, thank you so very much for your question and for being bold enough to join us on. I know I put you on the spot, but I really appreciate it. So thank you for calling in from Saskatoon. And Simone, do you have any advice for any of our members that are aspiring writers? Because we do have a few, I know, across the globe that do also want to write their own books. As a female writer, do you have any advice you could offer them?
The number one piece of advice I give to every single aspiring author that asks me about it is finish the book. Because most aspiring authors, not all, but most aspiring authors that come to me, they're like, oh, how do I get my book published? And I say, well, how far are you in? They're like, well, 4 chapters. You're like, you can't publish 4 chapters. Like, you have to have that experience. You have to go all the way through and get all the way to the end. And, even if you don't have a publisher at that point and no one's paying you, and it seems like you're kind of writing into a void, But that's how every single published author started, was by just sitting there and going, I think I'm just going to finish this. Maybe no one will ever want to read it, but I'm still going to do it. And that kind of journey gets you to the end of the book. And then you get to that point where you're like, yeah, I could do this. And it just gives you that point where you're like, well, I did it once, I could do it again. And then you can start marketing yourself, and it just gives you that confidence boost where you're like, this is something I do. And here's something I wrote. And it's, you just kind of presenting it like, and if nobody wants this, I'm going to just write another one. So that's always my number one piece of advice, is finish it. You just got to finish it, because it's a big thing to do, is finish it. And if you finished it, and you just have to be persistent. There's a weird thing where you have to you have to have some humility, and at the same time, you really have to believe in yourself at the same time. So it's really hard to master. I don't think anyone actually masters it, but it's kind of what's required, where you're like, you have to be polite and willing to work with people, but at the same time be like, check this out. I wrote this book. Isn't this great? So you have to have kind of these two things at the same time. But everyone finds it hard. Everyone finds it hard. Always.
It's you're pretty much creating for me at least, it's a movie in my mind, right, that's playing as I'm reading the book. So I admire the talent that goes into that, and the fact that you create a story that all of us can read and escape from our everyday life and whatever issues are happening in our own worlds, or whatever is happening in our day-to-day. So we really thank you, from everyone that's a part of the Girly Book Club. It's been a delightful book to read. And as far as books go, what's on your nightstand? What are some of your favorite authors, and what are some of the books that you enjoy reading?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I just finished a book called Never Have I Ever by Joshilyn Jackson, which was kind of a domestic suspense.
Yeah.
And it's actually about a book club. It's about a woman who runs a book club, and this woman who's new to the neighborhood comes to her book club and is like creeping her out, and turns out there's this whole history between them, and it's kind of like they're almost like these two nemesis, these two enemies. So that was quite delicious to read. I like that a lot, actually. One of my favorite books of all time is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I think I've read it a couple times.
Isn't that amazing?
I adore that book. It's just a world. I mean, you just open that book and you're just gone from your life. You're just not living your life anymore. And so those people are so real. I loved it. I love Daisy Jones and the Six as well.
Yes, me too. And the writing style was very different in Daisy Jones, coming from sort of an interviews perspective.
Yeah, she is crazy talented. She's a crazy talented writer. I don't even know what's next. You don't know what's next, right? Like it's going to be great, because she is really talented writer. I admire her a lot. So yeah, those are some of my favorites for sure. Yeah.
Perfect. So where do you see yourself sort of 10 years from now? Where do you see yourself as far as books or movies, or talks with women or women's issues? What's your future hold for you?
Well, I go crazy when I'm not writing, so I'm always going to be writing. But publishing is an industry where you just don't have a lot of control. So, the worst that could happen is, for some reason, my publisher is like, no one's buying ghost stories anymore. So, don't call us. So, that, and, for me, it's like, okay, well, that's fine. But I'll always be writing something. I do want to stretch into writing something that's more of a suspense, that doesn't have the paranormal in it, because, this was my 6th ghost story. The Sundown Motel is my 7th, and I'm going to be writing an 8th. So it's going to be 8 books at that point that are all paranormal. And so I do want to maybe change things up a bit. But it'll always be a Simone St. James book. It'll always be, a little unsettling, I think, and always be about women. It's just, I just find other books that aren't about women really boring. So I wouldn't never write a book about men and spend a whole year writing it. I would be so bored. I just find women more interesting. So that's always going to be what I write, for sure.
Well, Simone, we at the Girly Book Club are delighted that you are our author for October. I know from the members of my book club on Facebook that people have really enjoyed your book. I know that Joanne did in Saskatoon, as well as some of our other members. So we are happy and so delighted that we chose you to be our author for October. We are happy to invite you to any of our book clubs, whether you're in our area of Toronto, Etobicoke, Mississauga, or anywhere in your travels. We will be delighted if you could join us. I know Joanne's raising her hand. Come to Saskatoon, I'm sure she's saying. But we would be happy to have you. And it has been truly an honor and a delight. And I am going to buy all your books that you've already written. And I am certainly a devoted fan, as I know many of our book club members are going forward. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And thank you for being with us during the interview and for letting us use your book for our book club.
Well, thank you guys so much. This has been a great honor, and Taylor and I are very happy to be here. She's still asleep. Yeah, no, this has been fantastic. It's been a delight. So yeah, thank you guys so much.
So perfect. So ladies, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for sharing in Simone's book and for reading it. And I hope if you're like me, you're going to pass it on to the next person, or I've already bought a couple of copies to be given as Christmas gifts to some of my favorite people that I know that would really enjoy this book. So on behalf of the Girly Book Club, on behalf of Erin Woodward, our founder, and on behalf of all the ladies that have joined us tonight and those that will view the video, thank you so much, Simone St. James, for being here and for joining us to talk about your amazing book, The Broken Girls. We loved it, and we loved having you here today. So yay, Simone. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Take care.
Cheers.